So I'm working on a 14 by 18 inch panel, and I have toned using burnt sienna. The burnt sienna underneath will give some warmth to the cliffs. As I mentioned before, I also like having burnt sienna, little bits of burnt sienna popping through as a nice complement to the blue-greens of the ocean. There are not a lot of shadows today, so I thought I would challenge myself with trying to create light in this painting without the use of shadows. All right, so for the sketch, typically I just map out the big shapes, not a lot of detail, decide where the horizon is. So, and then I come in and I can make, you know, more specific adjustments to the shapes. All right, so today I'm going to start by mixing a color for the sky, and I'm going with titanium white, ultramarine blue, a touch of phthalo blue, and I'm using liquin to thin my paint, and also a little bit of odorless mineral spirits. That already looks a bit dark, so I'm going to add some more titanium white to it. More liquin. And even though there's a pretty substantial bit of tone on this panel, it's not corrupting the blue, so I'm not really picking up much of it with the brush at all. All right, so next I will mix a color for the water, starting with a mixture of titanium white, ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, and a touch of dioxazine purple. And I want to get an interesting pattern here. And I'm using the negative space of the, you know, the ocean to kind of carve out the shape of the rocks. And again, this color is sort of an approximation. It doesn't have to be exact at this point. I'm going to be making adjustments later. Even the whitewater areas, if I don't like the pattern that I leave for the whitewater, I can just always, you know, kind of erase out some white water using a paper towel. It's getting windy. The water gets a little bit greener closer to shore, so I'm going to mix in some cadmium yellow medium. All right, so what I was attempting to do here is just sort of carve out some shapes that looked appealing to me. This here is the whitewater. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but that's not that important. I'm mostly focused on the rocks, and I feel like the composition is working and the shapes are good. I'm gonna add a bit of land out on the distance, but just a slight touch of that. I'll do that later. There is some land over here, but it's so far off you could barely see it, but I'd like to include it. Actually, the wind is picking up, so I'm going to need to turn my panel so that it's in line with the wind so it doesn't blow over, and hopefully I won't lose another camera today. But so I'm going to do that. I've been trying to film in the light as much as possible so you guys can see the color, but now that I'm going to start doing the cliffs, I need to have the panel so that it doesn't have direct light on it. All right, next I'm going to mix up some earth tones for the rocks here. So I've got 3 mixes here. The first one is yellow ochre titanium white with a bit of dioxazine purple. This one here is ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, titanium white, and a touch of cadmium yellow medium. And then this one here is sort of the same mix as that, except I've added more cadmium yellow medium, and then I also added a touch of this cad red light, which I don't use very often, but I think today it could be helpful for some of the warmer portions of the cliffs. Since I'm mixing these colors in full light, I use my palette to gauge how dark the colors are. So my palette is a mid-tone neutral gray. So as you can see, these colors, this one's a bit lighter, but these colors here are about a mid-tone. One of the advantages of pre-mixing colors is that you can start adding and adjusting without having to remix a whole different pile of paint. So here I'm just adding a little bit more warmth with some burnt sienna. I'm seeing some areas out here that are a little bit warmer. I want to leave areas of the tone coming through at the end, so I'm applying the paint in a transparent fashion here. And then, like I said, I'm going to let a little bit of the tone show through. So at this point, I'm going to switch from this brush, which is a natural bristle number 8 flat, to these synthetic flats. This is a number 6 and a number 4. And I'm not going to do scrubby strokes as much now. Now I'm going to load the brush, make a stroke, load the brush, make a stroke. All right, so I'm going to start by adding some titanium white to the sky. So I'm just adding straight titanium white, and it's mixing a little bit with the blue that's already on the panel. Right, so as I mentioned, I'm building up the surface using short loaded strokes using this synthetic flat. And next I need to put some ultramarine and white to indicate like sky reflection. I've done that a little bit here, so there was like a dark green underneath. I've got to be careful because the painting keeps on almost blowing off of the easel. But that gives you an idea right there of what that looks like. So it gives the water the appearance of translucency or depth. Okay, so here is what I finished up with. And as I mentioned, I was going for a feeling of light, even though there weren't any real strong shadow patterns. There were a few shadows like under the arch here and this little bit here, also in the cracks of the rocks, but not much. For the most part, this painting or this scene was in full direct sunlight. This is a sort of scene that's really challenged me in the past. I exaggerated the warmth in the cliffs. I kept the water pretty accurate. but I did push the warmth in the cliff. So I'd mix up a color, like these sort of grayish browns down here, but then I would warm it up either using an orange, like say a burnt sienna mixed with cad yellow medium, or I'd warm it up with yellow. Another thing I looked for was, you know, the reflections along the surface, whether it be these little bits of ultramarine blue with titanium white reflecting the blue of the sky, and then also little bits of orange that are reflected from the cliffs. I think that adds, you know, some translucency and a feeling of depth to the water. I also left, you know, areas that are unpainted, as I mentioned, so you can see the tone coming through. And I think that also really contributes to the illumination. So one of the things I didn't mention during the process was the fact that I was walking back about 10 feet from the panel every few minutes. I know I've talked about that regarding composition, you know, how important it is to walk back to make sure your composition is working, but it also applies to color and values as well, just to see if the overall painting is working. So as I mentioned, I'd mix up approximate colors, I'd apply them, and then I'd walk back to see how it was reading in the painting. And oftentimes, like I mentioned, I had to keep warming things up to get that light effect that I was after. So yeah, just sort of a reminder to walk back, so important. This was a 14 by 18, so walking back about 10 feet was just right. Obviously, if you're painting a smaller panel, you don't maybe need to walk back that far. And if you're painting bigger, walk back further. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. I got a bunch of extra videos on there, a supply list, that sort of thing. So if that sounds interesting, check it out. Like I said, link below. Other than that, stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm gonna get it. Yeah.